Hey, Utkarsh, great having you here. And
Thank you for having me.
so just so the viewers know, Utkarsh is this amazing celebrity and one of the first celebs who's come on the Atmic YouTube conversation channel. He even has a Wikipedia page. So he's basically written some of the screenplays for all of these amazing what they call it mythological. We'll probably discuss it in the midst of this conversation, whether it's mythological. But these series which are called mythological serials like Mahadevo Dev and there is RadhaKrishn and Vaishnodevi and Mahakaali. There's a whole list of them. Probably Utkarsh can only give us deep. But I want to tell two more things. One is that Utkarsh is the one, the Mahan person who got me into Isha Foundation. So the first program I did with Sadhguru was because he pushed me into it, and he even made this statement, which Utkarsh, I'll remind you. You said that if you don't like the program, I'll return your money to you. That's what he said. And then I never asked him for it. But so then that whole Isha saga started from there. So a lot of you all would have seen me speak about Isha a lot. So that's where in 2005 this happened. In 2005, when Sadhguru had come to Bombay for a program, so he had pretty much pushed me and got me into it. So it was pretty cool. And yeah, there was another thing I wanted to introduce you as. So anyway, you would probably know Utkarsh a little bit if you have seen some of these serials. And in this conversation, we basically want to just look at what role these serials play and just kind of have a good conversation with Utkarsh, because Utkarsh is, the thing that is really interesting here is that he's not just making these serials, he is very much into it. Like he has experienced these advanced programs in Isha and I think other places also. He's now doing a Sanskrit, MA in Sanskrit in Mumbai University and specializing in Vedanta. And he's an amazing person actually. He knows his stuff a lot and is a very respected person. So I was so happy when he was writing these Mahadevo Dev and all, because yeah, I just thought it was amazing that someone who has experienced spirituality and knows so many things would go and do a screenplay for a mainstream series. That was amazing. So great, Utkarsh. Thank you for coming on our YouTube channel and like doing a public chat with, we can discuss many things. So
no, I am just fascinated. I mean, I enjoyed the last few minutes because I have seen you in days where you would, I mean, for Priyanka's subscribers and her fans, she wasn't this vocal and expressive, say a decade and a half ago or so. So for me, it's fascinating to see, and I was almost overwhelmed, and I'm feeling so happy to see Priyanka do this. I for a moment forgot what all I had to say because I was just enjoying watching her talk. So thank you, Priyanka, for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to have this conversation with you.
Great, thanks a lot. And yes, so I think coming to the first thing was, how did it all happen for you? This whole screenplay writing and all. What were your initial thoughts? And
actually, as you know, in 2010, I returned to Mumbai from ashram. I was living in ashram for a
Isha
while
Foundation,
there. Yeah, Isha Foundation. Yes, Isha Foundation. So as I returned, I had to like pick up the pieces and start my life again in the professional corporate life. Pre-ashram days, I mean, I altogether have about a decade of radio. So I rejoined Big FM of Reliance as the national head. At that time, the movie Guzarish launched, and I was working with Sanjay Leela Bhansali while that was happening. The movie didn't do very well, but the connection happened at that time. Sanjay Leela Bhansali was exploring television. I'm joining the dots. So he said, "Why don't you come over and join me?" So I joined Bhansali. I left my radio job. I joined Bhansali Productions as a creative director. And while doing that, we were building a show called Saraswati Chandra, a romance-based show for Star Plus. And although I was creative director and we were trying to find a writer, and he wasn't happy with the writing. And eventually he told me, "Why don't you write?" So I said, "I'm not a television writer." He said something very interesting. He said, "Look, you've been writing for radio." He said, "Writing for radio is not very different from screenplay, because when you're writing for radio, you are creating words which will create visuals in the mind of the listener. And screenplay is creating visuals in the mind of the reader. so that when the director reads it, he knows what to shoot. I'm like, I never thought of it like this. He said, try it. So it was actually through his inspiration and through, I would say, almost push, I got into it. While this was happening, I met a gentleman called Hiten Ganatra, who was a spiritual person himself, and he was also involved in the show Dev Mahadev.
Okay.
And it was him who said, why don't you come and meet Adrut Pathak, who's the showrunner? And one thing led to the next. And I was because in the middle I wrote a show partially called Diya Aur Bati Hum, which I'm very happy I did, because that 6 months of writing that show, I learned that Saas Bahu is not for me. If I had not done that, I probably would have gotten sucked into it. But 6 months of that, and I'm like, oh my God, I mean, nothing against it. I know it does very well, and I'm happy for people who enjoy it. I realized probably there are people who can do a better job at writing that than me. And I would always believe in being somewhere where I can really contribute. So I was very fortunate when Dev Mahadev happened, because Priyanka, I mean, look at my good fortune that I never have to write lines like "Namak zyada gira, rasode mein kaun tha, kal muni ghar se nikal ja" type things. and I still get paid for it. I still get respected. You get to win awards, and more than anything else, you get a sense of satisfaction is a very big word, but you get a sense of contribution, that you are writing something which is, I mean, we'll come to these stories also later, where you may or may not realize, but on an average, when I'm writing a show, because India has such huge access of people watching television, I have the good fortune of reaching more than 1 crore people per week who are watching the shows, and this suddenly gives you a sense of responsibility.
Yes.
That what you're writing is reaching so many people. It's not something that you're giving, say, it's not even like a satsang. When Mahadev speaks something and people are following it, we are not talking in hundreds of thousands, we are talking crores per week. And it's like, whew. But that's the good fortune. So yeah, but then this is how it happened, and I liked it, and I realized that so many things I had done in my life, which Priyanka, I mean, come on, you will testify, because you are a fellow seeker like this, that a lot of things in our journey make more sense in hindsight. Especially for people like you and me, who have made choices in life which may look impulsive, but they make sense later. So many things that I had studied, from my interest in Sanskrit to my interest in spirituality and my interest in different texts, because of combining these two, it all looked like it had no role to play in my life, because I was on radio, I was doing these things, and suddenly it all became a strength. It's like Superman in Krypton was a common man. He had to come to planet Earth to suddenly realize that everything was a strength. And suddenly like, oh my God, all these interests I had in Shiva, in Krishna and all, in this world, suddenly that's a strength. So I mean, people today in interviews, they say, oh, wow, Mr. Naithani, you read books and you have to research so much. I'm like, are you crazy? I'm the luckiest guy in this country who gets paid for reading all these books.
We would have anyway wanted to read them.
Yeah. So, yes, so to answer your question, this is how I got into it. And then I tried once in 2015, when I was thinking, oh, am I getting typecast or something? But then I realized, no, let's get typecast, because this is what I like. Yeah. So in fact, only now in post-lockdown, I've had to shift a little bit away from mythology. That's because post-lockdown, paise nahi hai channels ke paas mein. So mythology-based shows are the most expensive to make, because the sets, the computer graphics, the ornaments, and now they want to make more Saas Bahu because they're easier to create. But I have, since 2012-13 onwards, I've just maintained this connection with all this stuff, and yeah, that's how I reached it. That's what I liked.
So how did you do all the research and stuff? Like, what went behind some of these things?
So normally, when tomorrow, suppose if Priyanka Dalal decides that, okay, I want to write a show, what also happens that generally, as a rule, the channel insists that the production team should also have an official researcher on board, whose job is to research and give. But all the writers who are successful in this genre are the people who are decent researchers of their own, because you can't always depend on somebody else feeding you information and then you do that.
Yes.
So when I entered, when I was like a noob in while writing Mahadev, so there was a researcher, but in no time I realized that a lot of the stuff that what they call research, I didn't know, but I knew those stories already because I had grown up reading all that.
Yeah.
And in fact, even my years with Isha, so many of the stories,
Yeah.
because you see, as a North Indian, I realized that I had a bigger umbrella of Shiva information, because with Sadhguru, I had heard a lot of South Indian stories as well, which normally I would not have access to.
Right.
In fact, once when I had met, I was happy to find out through one Swami of Isha that Shivam, it is called in Tamil, and it was #1 in Tamil Nadu also, Dev Mahadev, when translated in Tamil. So Sadhguru had allowed the Swamis to watch only one show on television, and that was Shivam. And when I met him one day, and as you know him, he wouldn't let a chance to pass by, and he immediately says, he's like, I watch your show, and sometimes I feel like, he says, sometimes I feel like sending you an invoice, because so many of things that you learn from you put down. So yeah, I know for a fact that he himself was also watching what I was writing. So so research wise, that was my good fortune. There's so many things that people have to research. I mean, I'll say you would have heard of this novelist called Ashwin Sanghi.
Yeah.
Sanghi, he's a very well-known thriller writer who's also used mythology and all. He had once told me when we were dealing on some project together, and he said that if I knew what all you knew, my book delivery time would be cut down by 50%, because I have to spend a year researching. That's the kind of stuff that you are rattling off with your past memory. So that's what I meant. That from my childhood, in my family, in whatever I had read, which I never thought that it would be useful for work, suddenly became mainstream. I mean, you can imagine how lucky I feel that way, and how much gratitude I feel, because like, wow. So yes, but I do research even now. I mean, if I were to just take you towards my book cupboard, my book cupboard is like Vedas, Purans, all the things. Again, I don't see it as work. I'm just very lucky that I get to do that now. In certain shows, I also get involved as a researcher, because then I just even if I don't have the time to write, I have time to give them input in terms of from different Purans what has happened, because so when I do research, it's about, as time passes, Priyanka, you become aware of which aspect of the book is relevant or visual in nature. For example, for a show like RadhaKrishn, a lot of material was used from Brahma Vaivarta Puran. And Brahma Vaivarta Puran has a few stories where for pages is just what you call stutis of people praising God. Now, as you're in the field, you realize that that's not going to give you anything. You're actually seeking, for lack of a better word, dramatic stories, where you can create some dramatic tension, where there are two sides, where you can create visual drama, where you can end episodes saying, oh my God, what's going to happen next? So you develop an eye for this, that even when you're going through the Puranas, you know, okay, this can work. And this is good, this is very nice, but this won't work, depending on the show that we are creating. So say Mahadev was a show in which there was more bhakti, philosophy, and drama. There was action, because he would, that's why he's such a big hit, because he kills, so you get visual drama. Okay. Now when I'm talking about say RadhaKrishn, so there was lesser bhakti, bit more emotion or bhav, a sense of divine romance where Radha is concerned. Okay, still a bit of drama, but one aspect that would not get utilized in Shiva's stories is humor. Because Krishna's stories would have a lot of humor coming in it. The way he didn't give his philosophy by sitting and giving Gyan from Kailash. He created situations in people's lives. So immediately my approach changes while researching, because I know what are the do's and don'ts visually now. If there is one thing that helps you when you're creating for the visual medium, is understand the grammar of what will work and what won't. So then I would research accordingly. So yeah, that's the thing. But like I said, I'm just very happy that I get to research.
No, that's great. So the thing is that in Indian culture, the stories are so many different, first of all, types of stories. I think the same story may be told so many different ways in different places and different Purans also, I guess. So how do you
Yeah,
come up,
absolutely.
how do you make your cohesive version?
Um, I have a very non-philosophical answer to this. Um, um, I did a lot of work with a particular producer called Siddharth Kumar Tiwari, Swastik Productions. Last 5 years, like we've done Shani, Mahakaali, RadhaKrishn, Karn, all the same producer. So we had a very simple way of ending discussions. We would actually say, "Show ka naam kya hai?"
Acha.
See, the beauty of our culture is that, and this is where sometimes there's a different conversation altogether, but sometimes I tell people that when they have issues with our stories, because I remember one American friend of mine was saying, "But Utkarsh, what kind of culture or your stories are? You aren't even sure who. In some story, one person did this. In another story, someone else did this." So I said, "See, here's the catch: that you are judging the quality or essence of a very multi-directional philosophy with the binary perspective that you have learned, and you are testing it based on that. if i have if I am, I mean, you are a genius yourself. If I am trying to judge a three-dimensional world with a two-dimensional perspective, I'm only going to say two dimension. I'm not going to see the third dimension. So the beauty of this culture, and you know this already, but this is more for your viewers, that here the ultimate is not to meet God. That's a given. Our ultimate is mukti.
Yeah.
And God is a tool
God
to
is
the
a
end
tool.
of the to me.
I think that is one thing from
Now
Sadhguru
this
I
is
remember.
shocking. This is and I've had the privilege to, as I'm studying Vedas and Vedanta, I mean, it is full of this perspective. That I mean, if you in Rigved, it's very clear that um, that they are not creating any drama in Rigved. When you look at Rigved, they are. It's a very simple thing. Okay, fine. What do you want? If you want this to happen, have this approach. Don't get too caught up into this. So what I tell my friends is that the problem is not that we have different versions. The problem is that you think only one could have happened. In the world of quantum mechanics, which are shockingly and eerie. I always recommend them to them. Like a decade ago, that more than that documentary had come. What the bleep do we know? I encourage them to watch that. You will see it is eerily similar stuff to what we are talking about. That it is just your limitation of thinking only this could have happened. I'll give a very simple example that because, and after that, then I can more directly refer to what you were talking about. Noah's Ark.
Yes.
And Matsyapuram, when Manu takes out the boat, it is shocking how similar the stories are. Okay? To the extent that Noah was a descendant of Abraham, who guided him, and Manu originally was Santan of Brahma. Now, if you
Brahma and
write
Abraham, yes.
Abraham, if you say this Abraham, okay, take the first A, put it in the end, it becomes
Yes.
Brahma.
Yes.
Manu's third daughter's name was Ela, and Noah's Muboli, the girl who traveled with him later, was Ella. Okay, we are talking, it's almost like sometimes I say that the same broad story was given to two different writers and they detailed it in different way based on their culture. However, my point is this: the fundamental difference, why I brought this up, is not to show the similarities, but to show one very clear difference. And this can say a lot. The fundamental difference between the story of Noah's Ark and Manu's perspective, not to be confused with Manu's Smriti, that's a different ballgame altogether. I'm talking about Matsyapuram's first chapter, when Manu goes through this entire situation, is that Noah's story is linear. What I mean to say is that there was a problem, they had to escape, he started the world in a different way, whereas in this culture, there is a word called Manvantar. Manu Antar. Manvantar, it means that everything is cyclic. That every time when the peak of negativity happens, that's in Kali Yuga, okay, Kali becomes active, Kaliki comes, Kali isn't killed, that's the beauty of it, he cannot be killed, uska daman hota hai. When he gets dominated, Kalki creates the great deluge, and you have Satyug once again. So it's circular, and this is called a Manvantar. Every time a new Manu, and this is also very similar to the concept of parallel universe, where you say they are all similar with one little difference. One sci-fi show called Fringe explored this beautifully, that they showed two different worlds, and they say this, that if you go into their world, it's very similar, but there'll be a few changes. And Srimad Bhagavatam also talks about this, that we are in the 7th cycle. And it's, I mean, as a student of science, it's fascinating to read all this. That's why I'm very fortunate that then I study Sanskrit, because I'm suddenly not dependent on a Pandit telling me, oh, believe in God and all that happens. I dislike is a very strong word, but I genuinely do get put off with the way, say, Srimad Bhagavad Gita is interpreted. Because Bhagavad Gita is made only about bhakti, which it isn't when you read it. There is so much perspective of science of it. Most people think that Bhagavad Gita is only about bhakti. Okay. I mean, I was recently talking about Bhagavad Gita to a group of people where the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita is Arjun Vishad Yoga. Vishad literally means depression. Okay. Arjun ka depression hai when he chhod deta hai. And I spoke of entire Bhagavad Gita as a therapist and a patient, which is very relevant to 2020. This is when I was talking about it. That how Krishna is doing the same thing. I'm a trained counselor, you know. So Krishna is doing the same thing that a therapist would do. And how the story is not about, you know how people say, oh, this guy was fighting, didn't want to fight, so Krishna gave him gyan, so he fought. It's about depression and anxiety making you inactive, and also a therapist leading you to action. And the best part is also one another way of saying it. Every time we say this is what Gita is, we are limiting it. That's the beauty of that coded thing. So back to this. So it's circular. Because of that, every story gets to have multiple versions, because Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. It has happened again and again and again and again.
Wow. So, okay.
So this, when you think about it, suddenly it doesn't sound so bad that, for example, Sagar Manthan, okay? The beauty is, and again, you and I have heard this from Sadhguru. I was lucky enough to then refer to the books where this came from, but this is a culture where they said, so it don't simply hero worship the god. See what suits you. Like, you know how Sadhguru used to say, do you want a male god? We want a male god. Do you want a monkey god? We want a monkey god. Okay. So depending on the story, like if you look at Vishnu Puran, the entire Sagar Manthan, when Amrit comes, it's very Vishnu-centric story. He became the tortoise, unke uspe aaya, then how he became Mohini to take the Amrit and things like that. And Shiva was meditating, और जब हलाहल आया तो Vishnu called Shiva, so Shiva came and had this thing. Now come to Shiva Puran. Different, same incidences, different lens. As a writer, you can see this very clearly what they've done, because now they know they're catering to people who are worshippers of Shiva. So the entire story of Shiva, how he's doing that, he encourages Vishnu to take the entire mountain on his back. He saves the world. He encourages. And the best part is this: you go to the Shakta perspective. Okay, the Devi Mahapuran, it is the Devi who asks Vishnu and Mahadev both to do what they have to do.
So fun.
So you see, you're saying this very often. People who have grown up thinking in a binary way, black or white, so they start saying, but then what happened? I'm like, why do you want to restrict it to saying only this could have happened? Which is when I again speak of Manvantar. I'm like, what appeals to you? Go with that. Because the point is not who did it. The point is what inspires you to you taking good action. So that's why, so to answer your question with the different perspectives, Sagar Manthan, I've written it in Shiva Puran. I've written the same Sagar Manthan in Mahakaali. You'll see they're written so differently. Same Sagar Manthan.
Wow, that's amazing.
Same sagar manthan happened in RadhaKrishna, happened very differently.
Oh, I didn't
Okay.
know you had actually written all three in different serials. That's amazing.
Yeah, because see, mythology, famous events, they are the same. So I get to actually take this situation, that if it, I did a show called Devi for Dangal last year. In that, it was written differently because that was Devi's perspective.
Right.
Okay, Mahadev was Shiva's perspective. Mahakaali was Kali's perspective because Mata Tara. Okay, then there's a Bengali story that when Shiva had the halahal, and I love this story. When he had the halahal, the story of Ma Tara goes that he almost fainted, and it was Kali took a form of Tara, and she actually supported Shiva, otherwise Shiva would have fallen, and she placed her hand on his throat, and that's why the wish stayed there and did not go down. In fact, if you look at the iconography, Kali and Tara look very similar, blue color. The difference is that Kali has a mundimal in front, her breasts are covered, and Ma Tara's breasts are showing completely. The reason for that is that in the entire Bengali perspective, and even in this way, Tara actually breastfeeds Shiva. And when he and this is the entire thing. What is the message here? It's about Purush and Prakriti, that she nurtures him back to health when he had consumed vish. So I'm just saying, you can't show Shiva being breastfed by Devi television, but I have shown the part of she stops the entire thing because this is in Mahakaali. So then you show that it was the woman who gave that stability to man. So yeah, that's the beauty of it, and I'm lucky enough to get to write all different perspectives.